Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. Today, we'll be talking about some of the challenges with employment for people with autism.
Yes, so thank you again for joining us. In America, the unemployment and employment statistics for those on the spectrum are fortunately not as delightful as one would think. For those like me who are in college or coming out of college, the unemployment or underemployment statistics is between 85 and 89%. And that is due to either being overqualified for the jobs we're applying for, or some of the issues perhaps with the interview process or soft skills to even be in the jobs.
It breaks my heart to even hear the statistics because a lot of this could be prevented with disability training for people in a variety of workplaces, understanding accommodations, understanding what types of things that people with disabilities, people with autism really need in order to be successful within their role.
Yeah, and a lot of these places may be intimidated by the fact that, like, oh, we need to spend a lot of money to help these people or to accommodate them. And some are just like, okay, we're not discriminating, but we want you to fit in this little metaphorical box, and you don't, so we don't even you didn't even register on our radar in the employment because AI looks at the personality tests that some of these employers have you go through, and oh, you don't fit in this box, you go in the reject pile right away. When it comes to the accommodations, sometimes all it is okay, you're allowed to wear headphones and you can provide your own, so it's no cost at all for the employer.
Exactly. And then, there may be some shifts in management. Let's say, somebody with autism gets a job, and then all of a sudden there's a new director, a new manager that they report to, and they're unaware of those challenges. And so those challenges are they're met with these new managers by them being, very punishing, very reprimandy, saying, oh, you can't be doing that. If you do this, then everyone else is going to have to do that. But the truth is, this is what is helping your employee set themselves up for success. It's not enough to just be an equal opportunity employer. You have to understand that people do need to have accommodations where they see fit.
Exactly.
So it's really tough for that reason. And, that's why underemployment happens and why unemployment happens because, you know, there's these challenges with accommodations, but also soft skills. Sometimes the interviewing process is really hard for a person with autism to get through. I know personally speaking, I've been on interviews where, I may be asked an open-ended question, and some of those soft skills that I end up trying to present almost come off as being a little bit too harsh because I either over answer the question or I ramble off on another topic and end up repeating myself. And sometimes employers will look at that and go, wait a minute, like this is a red flag for us. You shouldn't be doing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you practice so hard that you end up masking, and you have this script, and if you vary from the script, you kind of panic and you go back to trying being on the script, and it makes you look overly anxious or perhaps false, which in a way we are because we have to mask to pretend to be this neurotypical bubble that we're not, and we have to look you in the eye when we really hate doing it, and we have to pretend, oh, we're these social butterflies and we love socializing all the time, when in fact it causes major burnout. And if we do this type of job, by the end of the week we don't want to do anything else. We just want to sit in our rooms and not come out. Those types of jobs, like a lot of the jobs I've had, especially early on, were all customer service. It's fun coming out of high school and your typical high school job being the okay, customer service, work retail or work restaurants and always interact with people. No, please no.
If we can just talk a little bit about remote work being kind of a great disability accommodation in of itself, where you don't have to necessarily be face to face with a person in an office or in a location. Of course, there are challenges with remote work, involving technology, maybe not being able to understand how certain systems work outside of those offices. But that being said, I'm somebody who does hybrid work. I work remotely about 80% of the time, and I do on-site work about 20% of the time. It requires me to travel out of the state to go to my home clinic and be able to see the clients and the people that I work with. But that being said, that remote work for me is such a great accommodation to have because I do get to ultimately have the space to be able to go into my room after a long day. I do get the opportunity to unmask and unwind at home because when I'm at the clinic, I don't get to do that. I have to put on this show essentially that I love everyone and I love everything. And I'm going to just perform my way through this time because at the end of the day, if I don't have that, I end up almost completely falling apart.
It's good to be able to find jobs that really fit with your dynamic or allow you to be yourself a little bit more or give you the chance to work within your comfort zone to a degree where you don't have to push yourself through it to just survive the day.
It is good to have those types of jobs, and it's good to be able to have employers that do understand, but of course too, in order to get those types of jobs, you have to get through the interviewing process. And what is the hardest question for people with autism to answer? Tell us about yourself.
Yes. So getting up to that interview process, surviving the psychological assessment that typical jobs have you go through, and then when you finally land that interview, it's going to be a lot of your soft skills. It's going to be not doing your typical info dumping when it comes to answering these questions, because all the questions they're going to be asking you, whether it's going to be tell me about yourself or where you see yourself in 5 years, or it's all going to be geared towards the job that you're applying for. They're not asking you how's your day going and you telling them all the lovely little things going on in your life or how bad your day has been going. They're not here for that. An interview is get to know you and get to know them. So when it comes to an interview, you want to come prepared, knowing about the company you're interviewing for. For those like me who are big researchers, good time to use your research skills to learn everything you can about them. Just try not to scare them with how much you know. Don't be afraid to ask them questions about the job to show that you are interested too. This is going to be the soft skill of being able to ping pong back and forth in a conversation.
I'm glad that you mentioned not being afraid to ask questions because you will always be asked at the end of an interview, what questions do you have for us? Or do you have any questions for us? Something of that variation. And up until very recently, I actually would say, no, I don't have any questions. I feel good. But then as I started getting myself more and more into the field that I'm in, and also as someone who really needed to start advocating for herself, because there would be times where my skills were ultimately being taken advantage of, and I would get lowball offers, because of the education that I have and because of the skill set that I have. Companies would take that, and also the fact that I have a disability as, oh, well, you shouldn't be paid as much. And it's like, no, I deserve to be paid at the same level as my neurotypical colleague who also has their master's degree, who also has their board certification. So it's things like that where, I've had to really start asking those hard hitting questions and start really going into, for example, how do you set your employees up for success when it comes to communication? How do you make sure that, people are abiding by certain policies? Do you have a handbook? Do you have visual references for those with disabilities who need those visual resources? I am very upfront about that because if you want to see me successful at a job, you need to be able to help me just as if I am going to be successful for you by performing the job at hand.
And other questions you might want to ask include what's the typical day going to be like for me? What was the person who had this job before? What are they doing now? What's training like? Like what can I expect training? How intensive is it? And to jump on the salary aspect, contracts, if you're in a position or if you're freelancing and doing contracts are always negotiable. You
Yeah.
don't always have to accept your initial offer. It's always a back and forth. And regarding wages, those who are on the spectrum statistically earn 40% less than their peers with other disabilities. 40% less.
Wow. I mean, and that really just lights a fire because, people with disabilities deserve to earn fair wages, no matter what the job is.
I feel that part of this is a lack of negotiation skills on our part as well, because we're not trained to. We start at a young age masking and trying just to survive. So we are going to say yes to anything just to be accepted. And that's to our fault and downfall, where we need to start going, okay, yes, we also deserve equal rights, equal pay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're expected to almost like accept what's being handed to us because we are finally being accepted. We are finally, you know, sought out for a certain position that we don't go back in and actually raise our voices and say, hey, I was hoping for a little bit more, I was hoping like this. The art of negotiation is not one that is very easy. I know personally I have had to negotiate certain salaries with certain jobs, and who I've had to ask for help is actually none other than my mom. She's helped me with negotiating because sometimes, when it comes to those those jobs, I almost find myself being like, yeah, I want the job, this place sounds really great. I wish they didn't lowball me, but hey, this place sounds really great. I don't even care. And it's like, wait a minute, you should care because you do have certain expenses that you have to take account for. You do have to take account the experience that you have working in this particular field, assuming that you have a lot of experience. And that being said, it's really important to be able to advocate for those types of needs, not just accommodations within the workplace, but accommodations before you even get started in the workplace.
And you can't discredit the fact that like you do deserve this. You are well qualified individuals. Uh, Statistically, just to let businesses know, businesses have found employing those who are on the spectrum or neurodiverse have increased innovation and problem solving capabilities due to the fact that people on their teams now think differently and not just all the same.
Yeah, I mean, if I can give some advice to employers out there, treat the person that you are interviewing, that, you've decided to hire. I understand that you might want to meet a specific quota, but they're just a person at the end of the day. We're just people at the end of the day. And we just want to be able to gain experience. So treat us with the respect and dignity that we deserve. Compensate us fairly, compensate us equally. Of course, there's going to be people with more experience come and go, but at the same time, just because someone has a disability doesn't mean that we don't deserve to make livable wages. We don't deserve to have access to competitive employment. We absolutely deserve that and then some.
I absolutely agree. And one question that tends to come up a lot, even in the entertainment industry, which is starting to shift a little bit, is whether or not one should disclose during either the interview process or after the interview process, if at all. And that's typically going to vary depending on the environment you're dealing with, whether or not you can safely manage it without letting the employer know. And it's going to be up to the individual. In the United States, having a disability is a protected status, so it's not something that you have to share or legally required to.
That is very true. And I'll even be honest and open up about a situation where I was actually discouraged to disclose my disability. I was in my first position after college, and I was working as a direct support professional for a group home over in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I was given a job offer. And the HR lady that I spoke to, I mentioned, yeah, I have autism spectrum disorder. And she actually said, I would keep that hidden if I were you. And I didn't understand it at the time. I still don't really understand it just because it's one of those things where it's like, wait a minute, why would I hide a significant part of who I am? And she went on to say, you want to keep things like that hidden because that can be used against you. And for me, it was like, I was working in a group home, I was working as a direct support professional, and I wasn't necessarily going to like brag to people that I have autism, but I felt like I needed to say something to you as my HR. As somebody with autism, I felt like it was important for me to say that. And ever since then, there were moments where I would actually say, no, I don't have a disability, just because I felt like at this point, what if it could have been used against me? What if that were the case? But more recently, as a behavior analyst, I've made the decision to actually say, you know what, I do have a disability. And I say that, and I also request for specific accommodations because of the fact that there are certain things that I need to make me successful within my role as a part of the company that I'm working at.
I personally have not disclosed earlier when I first got my diagnosis. I didn't disclose, and yes, there's that stigma of they can use it against you, or employees might hear that and then decide not to hire you because of it, which is actually illegal under the American Disability Act. What a lot of people tend to recommend is to only disclose if you absolutely need to, or if you need accommodations, just provide your own, like you provide your own headphones or something. And if you ask questions, then you can bring it up, but only with management. As long as it's not as long as it's not disrupted to the job or a hazard, it shouldn't be too much of an issue. And personally now I've shifted to where I literally tell everybody, like people I meet, I'm like, I just flat out tell them, I'm like, I'm not out to hide it anymore. I am who I am.
Exactly. We should be able to celebrate. We should be able to say something, without any fear, without any stigma being held against us. I really hope that we can live in a more accepting world where we can express our disability and we can say these are accommodations that I need. I know that within interviewing skills, something that is not really practiced enough for people with autism, just because of the fact that unfortunately the 85 to 89% of underemployment and unemployment, people are assumed that they can't be employable. They can't work within any sort of working environment, but that shouldn't be the case. We deserve to have access to competitive employment. We deserve to have access to employment that will allow us to live and give us livable wages
And our independence.
and our independence. Absolutely.
And thankfully, there has been a growing shift in both interviewing processes, different job search boards, and even in the entertainment industry, where they're trying to shift how interview processes are done for those who are on neurodiverse or on the spectrum. In the entertainment industry, they're trying to get people who are neurodiverse to not mask when they're going through these interview processes, to be their more genuine selves as they play characters. They still have to act properly, but and be well trained actors, but they need to bring more of themselves to it, which is nice to see. And when it comes to general job industry, especially in the areas like STEM, where there are different organizations trying to shift the interview process to be more like skills based. So, like, can you do this stuff? Okay, you can. Guess what? You're hired. Versus having to go through the social navigation of the interview process. It's more tailored for those like us who are neurodiverse, that have an off day for an interview. There goes your uh, chance of that job. Now it's okay. My qualifications, my research, my love of this field supersedes that.
Even with it being skills based, some of the interviews that I've seen are more tryout based as opposed to more like face to face conversational. So, for instance, I had a job interview where, and keep in mind, I'm a behavior analyst. So, the way that, my job interview worked at the time was I had that face to face conversational interviews type style. But then I was told, okay, I want you to write a program and I want you to write like a skill acquisition program for helping a child learning how to label things. And I want you to write a support plan on how to decrease an aggressive behavior. And using those skills, I'm a kinesthetic learner. I'm also a visual learner. So I'm somebody who learns by doing and I learn by seeing it, not necessarily by you putting, you speaking to me in one ear and out the other. That's a big accommodation that I typically end up asking for, just because, again, I'm not somebody who is going to learn just by you saying something to me in a conversation. I will forget that by like an hour from now. And it's not because I refuse to remember, it's because my memory does not serve me that long. So that's
Yeah.
why I ask for those types of accommodations.
Yeah, I'm similar when it comes to someone giving me an ordered list of instructions that like rambled on for like a minute. I'm like, I need that written down, or I need to be able to write that down. Otherwise, it's gone.
Yeah.
Like shortly afterwards, of like I'll have like part of it in my mind, and then the rest of it like, what did you say? It's so much more beneficial to be able to have that with you, to be able, okay, it's just a simple request of paper and a pen to go, okay, let me write this down. Perfect. I know what I'm going to do. Just let me be. Of the jobs that I've done over my life, a lot of the jobs where I was left to my own devices to do what I need to do, as long as I knew what I was doing, I perfectly fine and excelled very well.
In my case, I work with a lot of different people. I work with a lot of different populations, and that can be really hard, but I've gotten myself more and more used to it. But at the same time, I still have to ask for specific accommodations, just because it's like, I can't just and do the job as is, there's certain things that I need to make sure that I'm successful for. For people who are out there who are struggling in their current jobs, I cannot encourage enough, if there's something that you feel that you need to make your job more successful, please speak up and say something. And if the employer does not have any sort of understanding as to why you need that specific accommodation, I know that getting financial independence is really, really tough, but at the same time, that employer does not deserve you. That employer does not deserve the hard work that you put into your job. That employer needs to become a lot more open to feedback. They need to understand that what they're doing is they are causing more harm than good to its employees.
Forcing you to go through the psychological damage of masking and having to fit in the bubble. Okay, socialize, greet your customers, smile all the time, and ask how their day is going, and have small talk, and be delighted that you're having small talk, even though it doesn't make sense.
Right?
But we can go on a rant about small talk on another day. Um,
Yeah.
there's a lot of changes that definitely still have to happen in the industry, but a lot of good that is starting to shift.
Absolutely. I hope that 85 to 89% of unemployment and underemployment that decreases. People deserve to have competitive employment. People deserve to have competitive wages, so that way they can live the life that they want to live and be able to live independently. I really do have hopes that for the future, more employers will become a lot more disability friendly. They will start listening and be more open to providing those accommodations and ensuring that those accommodations are met. So that way, people with autism can just have what they need to thrive in their employment.
Would be great to see those statistics go down. And one of the other things that can help with that is growing one's professional and social networks. Granted, yes, uh, getting through those social barriers can be difficult, and being in environments that may be very uncomfortable to try and have those connections can also be difficult. But there are ways to work through it as well. One thing would be to recognize one's limits when it comes to those social environments. Like, I know me, I can't be in super crowded rooms for too long, so I try to limit those types of interactions, or I make sure I wear my earplugs that allow me to hear people around me, but reduce the impact of the sounds around me, so I can still have those conversations safely for a little bit longer period of time than if I didn't have those in. Otherwise, I would have to limit my social interactions in those environments to a short period of time, and then make sure I excuse myself to get out. Because taking care of myself so I can still do the next day is way more important than forcing myself to be there the entire time, and no one is obligated to be there the entire time. It's okay to excuse yourself, and that's sometimes a hard thing to accept also. That inner people pleasers, like, no, I have to be there. It's like, no, I still have to be here. And you should be listening to your inner self going, okay, you should have already been out of here.
Our social battery runs so low, so much lower, so much quicker than, a person who doesn't have autism. when it comes to just being in a room with a lot of people, it is very, very easy to have your battery drained. But one of the beauties of the internet is there's ways to network online. You can network as simple as going on LinkedIn, going on Facebook, even like finding employment groups within your field. So it is really easy to be able to sort of go behind the screen and kind of go into that like unmasking mode and just having those interactions online. And the beauty of that too is you get to respond on your own time as opposed to on a specific time constraint where in person you do have to come up with a response rather quickly. A message you can leave unread for so long, obviously, you do have to be considerate and respond back as needed and everything, but at least with that online component, that response time doesn't necessarily have to be as quick.
And another benefit of online is being able to do informational or informal interviews with various companies to get to know them even before you even hit a job employment interview process, where you get to actually meet the people who would actually either work with or who would interview you. So it gives that recognition. So it's not brand new during the interview process. So it actually creates a more comfortable setting when you actually get to that point where you interview. That's another tip I have if you ever go to an interview is get there early so you can get a sense for the environment so you can adjust to the environment so you're comfortable during the interview instead of okay, it's new, okay, that's new. What does that sound? Oh my god. And instead of being there present and focusing on the conversation during the interview.
I think that's a really great tip because, going into new environments, you are being presented with unfamiliar scents, unfamiliar sights, unfamiliar smells, unfamiliar everything. And so it's one of those things where being there early might quote unquote look good to the professional that is supposed to be hiring you. But in a way, when you think about it, it is kind of like a disability accommodation because getting there early helps you sort of see, okay, what are some of the nuances and what are some of the things that maybe I need to look out for when I'm hopefully hired for this company or if I'm going to be taking the next steps into the interviewing process.
What do I need to be aware of? Okay, this is how I get around. Okay, so I don't get lost, and maybe take some notes about that while you're there. It's another way to, in a sense, interview the environment, not just the employer.
Exactly. Nothing wrong with that. Because you do need to get to know your environment just as if you need to get to know your boss.
That wraps up our discussion here on employment. Join us next episode when we're going to be talking about food textures, food sensitivities, and RFID.